I have been waiting for this moment for months. In late 2016, I was introduced to the original GPD-Win, an Intel Atom-powered tiny PC that quickly captured my heart. Thanks to some handy graphical tweaks, I was able to show a fair amount of games running on that device. Then, GPD introduced the GPD Pocket, a tiny MacBook-like laptop with a slightly better CPU, twice as much RAM, and a great screen. This thing quickly became my default out-of-home laptop, and if you have ever written me an email, it is likely that I answered from here. But turns out Shenzhen-based company GPD was not slowing down, because they are now finalizing the GPD-Win 2, a proper sequel that is so good that it makes the first device feel like a proof of concept. I have been playing with a prototype sent by GPD for the last weeks, and I'm still in shock. It is not a perfect device, but damn, it is quite the improvement. Let's start with what has changed from the original that I really like. The keyboard is much better organized, which makes typing and especially tweaking games way easier to do, although it is still not very comfortable for writing a lot of text. The input switch has been simplified, so you can easily switch between using the sticks as a controller or a mouse, and the pads are much better and more comfortable compared to the original. But they still do not click. This was a problem with the original GPD, which had the very improvised solution of moving the stick buttons to dedicated buttons that were impossible to reach while playing. For the GPD-Win 2, they were moved to the side buttons. It can lead to some confused actions when you're getting used to it, but it absolutely beats having them on the keyboard. And talking about improvised solutions, the cooling system in the original GPD-Win always felt a bit rushed. The fan was a bit too small, the vent was located in a place where the hands usually blocked the vent, and you paradoxically had to control the fan speed manually. While this was okay for smaller games, if you push the device as hard as I like to do, it could get uncomfortably hot after a while. But it seems GPD learned from the excellent cooling system of the GPD Pocket because, in contrast, the GPD-Win 2 has a nice large fan with a vent in the back. I will talk about how this affects temperatures in a bit, but for the moment, I can already say it is going to do much better than its predecessor. It mainly uses the same ports as the original, just a smaller HDMI, but this time the hard drive can be swapped out for another small M2 SSD, which means you have much better choices in terms of upgraded storage, not just a mini SD card. Also, it now has stereo speakers in front that sound fairly good, as you will hear in a moment. And as you can probably guess, it is a bit bigger and a bit heavier than the original, but for very good reasons. One is the bigger battery it has, which has so far provided with several hours of playtime depending on the game, and an unexpected upgrade in specs. Let's talk about that. The original GPD-Win used a modest Intel Atom X7 C8700 quad-core, mainly to cut on size and energy consumption. The GPD-Win 2 moves to an Intel M3 7Y30, a hyper-threaded dual-core. The reduction to dual-core might seem counterintuitive at first, but the M3 is basically a small, low-consumption, low-heat Kaby Lake i3, which, believe me when I say, it's a very important upgrade. This, combined with its Intel HD 615, makes for such a powerful package that I'm really surprised that they managed to make it work in such a small device. And this takes me back to the heat. I am sure part of the original reason for using an Intel Atom on the original GPD-Win was its incredibly low TDP of 2 watts. By comparison, the M3 jumps to 4.5 watts, which is higher by comparison but impressively small for what is essentially an i3 CPU. This means that the device does get hot, but the superior cooling system does manage to keep it cool enough to avoid the problems of the original. But this comes at a cost, because the fan can get a bit loud. Personally, I feel this is a good compromise considering what they managed to put inside. I would rather take a loud fan than a hot handheld. And on its current state, the GPD-Win 2 can get a little bit warm, but it never stops being manageable, no matter how many hours you put into it. But hey, all of that does not matter if it cannot game. So, can it game? Let's start with something I will have never dared try on the original GPD-Win, and probably my favorite first-person shooter ever, Doom. This game is another interesting example because it received a port to the Nintendo Switch, a console that is truly popularizing the concept of full quality games on a portable format. Given that the GPD Win 2 is closer in size to a 3DS, it will be initially hard to believe that something like Doom could be played here. So we're going to try the game on the lowest settings, an external resolution of 960 by 544, most shadows disabled using the trick from my Intel HD video, and this is actually really good. This is working really well. I decided to record footage off screen to actually illustrate the point. On the small screen of a handheld, lower resolutions are actually not that noticeable. And in that low of a resolution, games like Doom work really well. You may also notice that the driver version is a bit odd. I have been told this series of prototypes are using an Intel HD driver that has been customized for the device, so I have not changed it for now. I also need to point out that in order to play on a custom resolution like 960 by 544, it needed to be added to the custom resolution list in the control panel, and due to the wiring, you need to load the resolutions with the width and height switched. Alright, on to the next game. Let's try Metal Gear Solid 5, my favorite sort of open world sandbox. There is a complicated process that I have documented on a previous video to mod the shadows out of the game, and with this trick, and once again a resolution of 960 by 544, the game managed to maintain playable performance. This is terrible news to my productivity, so better move on to Skyrim Special Edition, another game that received a port on the Switch. The original GPD Win could, in fact, do the original Skyrim very well, and I put a fair amount of hours into it, so what about Special Edition? Using the configuration file from the video I dedicated to this game, and once again a resolution of 960 by 544 via the configuration file, it is able to maintain over 30 FPS during most of the testing, even when things get a bit hectic. Nice! Now PUBG is still not optimized enough that it can be run on an M3, but Fortnite, which seems to be actually gaining momentum over it, can. Oh boy, it can. As I have pointed out before, my initial configuration file tweaks for this game were all blocked, but recent updates have not only increased the performance of the game, but completely unlocked the internal resolution scaler to any value, which is something I plan to talk on its own video soon. On the lowest settings and an internal resolution set at around 50%, the game is good, really good. Fortnite is one of the few online games when you can actually somewhat compete with a controller, so the idea of a portable version is really interesting. An unexpected game that I wanted to throw into the mix is the recently released Dragon Ball FighterZ, an Unreal Engine 4 game that I have been unable to find tweaks for, but that works really well on low-end PCs on the lowest settings, with the GPD Win 2 being no exception. With an internal resolution of 60% and external resolution of 720, the game manages to log to 60 with some computing power to spare. Amazing. Finally, I wanted to give the old GTA 5 benchmark a try on the lower settings, 720p, internal resolution at 50%, FPS limit set to 30, and shadows disabled through the configuration file. And while the initial results are encouraging, the game does tend to stutter at the end of the benchmark. I have talked at length before about this mainly being a memory issue rather than a raw power issue, as this game really likes its memory. Out of the box, the device has a ton of RAM assigned to VRAM, so some specific tweaking can likely get it much closer to a stable 30. But for now, these are highly encouraging results. Of course, not everything about this device is perfect. For some reason, the screen locks to two positions, one that is a bit of comfortable to use, and the other that makes no sense whatsoever. This detail is infuriating considering how good the rest of the device is. And then there's the matter of price. Currently, you can stash a GPD Win 2 for $650 on the Indiegogo campaign in the description, which sounds like a lot if you compare it with a Switch, but not that much when you compare it with a cheap laptop of similar specs. So, is it worth it? I really think it is, but hey, let me know what you think in comments. I'm pretty sure you have a lot of opinions, and you will likely see more of this device on the channel. If you prefer articles over videos, this and many others have written versions over at ModMy. Thank you to GPD for sending me an early prototype, and thank you to the patrons for supporting me as always. See you around!